and on the stream at wingam.com.
Justin Kinner with you here, 937-518-1410. That's the number to call and jump in on the conversation. We will get back to your phone calls coming up here in a moment. The Reds are pretending to be in on Kyle Schwarber. I know I'm being negative. I always try to be positive. I'm being negative on this one. We see this play out in college all the time. A team that knows that they don't have a chance to get a certain recruit, they at least attempt to recruit this individual so that when they don't get this particular player, they can at least tell their fan base they tried. I'm not going to fall for it. That way, if I am being too negative and they actually do get them, well, it's a pleasant surprise, and I won't care admitting that I was wrong. That's actually a good time for me to be wrong as far as that goes. But we'll get into the Reds more coming up here in just a moment. Again, it's the Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun food, sports, and spirits. Let's talk some college football. Every Thursday, we get to hang out with the voice of the Buckeyes, Mr. Paul Keels, joining us now. Mr. Keels, welcome in, sir. Happy Thursday.
How you doing, Justin?
I'm good. Appreciate your time. As always, look, there's a ton to get into. I mean, on my list, obviously, Ohio State beats Michigan. They got Indiana, the Big Ten championship game coming up. Brian Hartline's no longer going to be here. Who are they going to replace Brian Hartline with? Playoffs coming up around the corner. I mean, I don't even know where to start. So let's start, Paul, with this past weekend, Ohio State, after losing to Michigan for 4 straight tries, they finally get it done. Everyone could breathe, exhale. The Buckeyes beat that team up north this past Saturday. You were on the call.
Well, and I think the most significant thing, one of the most significant things, because there are many, the fact that the game didn't start out ideally. You know, they throw an interception, fall behind 6-0, and thank goodness it wasn't 14-0. They held them to 2 field goals rather than 2 touchdowns. But as Ryan Day has talked about it after the fact, there was no panic. They just went about doing what it was they needed to do. I think defensively they were able to put a chokehold on Michigan, and it didn't hurt that Jordan Marshall couldn't come back in the game and be effective because of a shoulder injury. But you saw Ohio State's defense do what they've done all year, play at a high level. You saw the offense strike through the air early, and then late when the snow started to become more prevalent and they needed to grind the clock down, the running game kicked in, and they were able to put together that one long drive that really kept the ball away from Michigan's offense. So it was a combination of a lot of things that went very, very well for this football team who just, you know, and another key part of all of this, Justin, was the fact that you saw not only the head coach, or we saw, I should say, and this football team, they approached everything the week of the Michigan game like they had every other week. We've seen in the past where some coaches have changed things. They blared the music a little louder that week in the facility. You know, all of these different things that make the rivalry special, but it make it a different week. They kept business pretty much the same, and I think that certainly had a part in it.
You talked about how, you know, different coaches approach it different. I mean, it was the way they approached it the week leading in. Did you sense that was different than Ryan Day teams in the past? Is that what you're saying as well? Like, did this just seem different in the build up to this one?
Yeah, I did. I mean, not just Ryan Day teams, and yes, you have to include his previous teams, but other coaches as well. I mean, you know, we all know that this is a special rivalry, and you hope that never changes. But, you know, one of the things I think that Ryan Day learned and his coaching staff learned is don't make it so big that it tightens everybody up. And those are my words. I'm just paraphrasing. Yeah. And I think certainly for those of us that were around that facility during the press conference and during our weekly radio show, you could tell. And even just in our time with Ryan Day, he wasn't uptight or tense. He wasn't any different than he had been, at least externally anyway. So I think that had a lot to do with it. And their approach also was to be a more physical team, which I think you saw that they were, and also take advantage of the weapons they had, throwing the ball to their 2 top receivers, getting balls to Max Clare and the tight ends to keep drives going. Julian Sand, who picked up a crucial third down run to keep a drive going, something we hadn't seen a lot of. So there were a lot of things, and really they were able to make Michigan play one-handed, as Coach Cooper used to always say, and force them to try and throw the ball, which that was not their strength.
Bo Jackson was just, you know, obviously unbelievable. You talked about the run game and their ability to kind of close it out with the run late in that. But, you know, talking with just different people throughout the week, just recapping that game, the thing that's the most interesting is you don't really care who shows up and makes plays. You just need enough guys to make plays to get the win against that team up north. But I think what made it even more fun to watch was that the star players that have led you to this point all season were the ones that all stepped up. We didn't even know who the receivers were going to be technically until a couple days or the day leading up to it. And then Carnell Tate catches a touchdown. Julian Sand throws to Jeremiah Smith. You get Ennis involved. Bo Jackson goes off. The defense was great. Every star player that has led him to this point all played a pivotal role in that win over Michigan this past weekend.
And let's not exclude the offensive line with how well they played. They were knocking people off the line of scrimmage. They were protecting Julian Sain to the point where there were no sacks by the Michigan defense, and they were opening those holes for those running backs. And you mentioned Bo Jackson, Justin. Think about a freshman, 22 carries for a freshman in a game like that, and in less than ideal conditions. That certainly he has kind of started to separate himself a little bit from those other running backs. But you saw C.J. Donaldson do what he's needed upon when called upon. And, James Peoples was out there not carrying the ball, but he was out there sometimes as a slot receiver. And having an influence just with his presence there. So everybody had a hand in playing this. And another person not to forget, Jaden Fielding, who had 2 crucial missed field goals last year against Michigan. He stepped up and he hit all of his opportunities, 2 of them when called upon.
Paul Keels, voice of the Buckeyes, hanging out with us here today. The Justin Kinner Show, presented by Frickers, here on a Thursday. Paul, we talked about this coming into the season. When you think about that stretch, I mean, last year, the first expanded, 12-team expanded playoff where you saw Ohio State. After that loss against Michigan, they go on to, beat Tennessee, blow out Oregon in the Rose Bowl, then beat Texas, and then beat Notre Dame, and then kick off the 25 season with the win against Texas. And now they've rattled off all the wins in the regular season. They're undefeated. They're about to play for a Big Ten championship coming up on Saturday. You've been doing this so long. Has this been the most dominant stretch that you can recall in your time calling games for Ohio State? There's been so many great teams throughout the history of Ohio State, but when you think about the stretch that they're on, it really is surreal, and especially the opportunity to grow upon it. You got number 2 Indiana on Saturday, and then the playoff and a chance to repeat as national champions. This is quite the stretch that Ohio State's in the midst of right now.
Dominant in different ways from some of the other seasons, Justin. I think when you look at how this whole season has gone, you got through the big hurdle week 1 against Texas, and we know all of the attention was put on that. But they took care of everybody else between that and Michigan, and they did it in very workmanlike manner. I think we mentioned it during the game Saturday when they fell behind 6-0. It was only, I believe, the 4th time all year that they trailed in a game, and they've not trailed at all this season in the second half. So you can find fault with the opponents and those teams that didn't put up the resistance that we thought that they would, like a Penn State. But this team just went out and did what was needed to be done each and every week. Some of the stats are dominating, but you didn't see so many of the the big highlight plays or the wide margin of scores that maybe we saw with some of the other teams in the past. But this team just went out and did what they did and did it successfully, and in some ways, probably from a national perspective, did it very quietly. And now they're getting ready for what will obviously be their toughest test of the season, facing this Indiana team, preparing to get into a postseason run that you hope can match what they did last year. But as you said, the loss to Michigan last year seemed to fuel that postseason run. Right now, and the way Ryan Day's talked about it, it's to keep the momentum going, tick off one of their goals to win a Big Ten championship, to beat an outstanding Indiana football team. It's something that will put them in a number 1 position for the seeding in the postseason, but also just to keep their good thing going the way they've done it all year.
So many interesting matchups in that head-to-head with Indiana on Saturday. I mean, they have great wide receivers. Ohio State has great wide receivers, great quarterback play. They can run the football. Their defense has been outstanding. I mean, these two teams stack up. I mean, this is what you want out of a national championship, and we're going to get that on Saturday in the Big Ten championship. Ryan Day already touched on it this week. You shouldn't be punished to play in your conference championship. It's going to be interesting to see kind of what shakes out after the result on Saturday, regardless of who wins or loses.
Well, the prevailing thought is that both of these teams, regardless of the result, are going to end up with first-round byes. You can't think or guess that the loser would fall any lower than 4th and not get a first-round bye. So we know both of them are sitting in that position. Could the Heisman Trophy be at stake in this game with the way that both Fernando Mendoza and Julian Sain have played? That's another part of it. But also, winning a Big Ten championship. Indiana has not won a share of a Big Ten title since 1967. Ohio State hasn't won one since 2020 during the pandemic year. So those are important things. This is a conference championship game, unlike some of the others, that has some things at stake that maybe some of the others don't. Now, I know there's certainly the whole dynamic of what could happen in the ACC. The SEC has its own storyline there. The Big 12 possibly, depending on what happens. But this is one that the outcome is not going to determine the postseason life of either of these two teams. It could determine positioning, but also to these two teams, most importantly, it will determine a conference championship.
Texas, a lot's being made about Texas, if they be left out. They have that, the 3 losses, and there's so many different ways to view this. But obviously, you look at the fact that they challenged themselves with putting Ohio State on the schedule, as Ohio State did with putting Texas on the schedule. And lots being made about, if Texas is ultimately left out and punished in the eyes of some for that loss against Ohio State, there's many believe that's going to really alter the future of scheduling for how these Power 4 schools put their non-con schedules together. I heard that Sarkisian came out and said they're going to honor the upcoming schedules that they have, with Ohio State and another big one after that. But do you think that will have a ripple effect on how these big schools schedule on their non-con moving forward if Texas is ultimately left out of the playoff?
Here's the answer to that. Don't lose to a subpar Florida team. That Florida loss is the one that's hanging around their neck. They deserve credit for wanting to come to Columbus and play Ohio State better than anybody this season has. When you look at the margin of victory and look at what Texas was able to do, and that Texas team is a better team now than they were when they were here Labor Day weekend. Arch Manning is playing so much better than he was that first week of the season. But again, the results on the field have to matter. And I'm sure you've probably wrangled over the discussion about Notre Dame and Miami, and that's going to be a big screaming point depending on what comes out with all of that. But that's fine. You played Ohio State the way that you did, but don't lose to Florida.
No, simple enough. And I brought that up just because, Ohio State fans are, they're loading in on Texas. I said, hey, let's be a little careful. You look at Ohio State's schedule next year. You got USC, you have Oregon, you have Indiana, you have Texas. Of course, you have that team up north. The schedule next year not as forgiving, but it will be interesting to see how that does play a role moving forward. But you're right, beat Florida. You beat Florida in a game you should win. You're not in this position as far as that goes. But other news this week, Paul, that I think we shouldn't be surprised that this is happening. I think it was just a little bit of a surprise because it seemed to kind of come out of nowhere a bit with obviously Brian Hartline. I'm going to be leaving Ohio State after this upcoming playoff run to become the head coach at South Florida. I don't think anyone's surprised that he's ultimately getting a head coaching gig, but were you surprised when the news came out when it did?
Only because learning after the fact that it happened very quickly in a 24-hour period. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what surprised the people, namely Ryan Day, the head coach, and the people within the organization over there, that it happened as fast as it did. But not surprising that Brian's getting a chance to be a head coach. And I think it's a great move for him and his family because, South Florida certainly has shown that they can be a dominant team and they can be a team that can contend with those in the power conferences. So this is a great stepping stone for him, and especially when you consider how well he's recruited, how well he is recruited in Florida. He spent some of his time as a player there with the Miami Dolphins. So, you hope that it isn't something that has an effect on what's going on this season. Certainly it's going to have an effect on what's going on with recruiting. And those who are recruited are being recruited still with the idea of playing for Brian Hartline. But, you can't fault somebody for making an upward move. And this is a great move just from the outside looking in for Brian Hartline.
His connections there, but were you surprised that it wasn't a Penn State or maybe with all the big branded jobs that were out there, and maybe he wasn't offered some of these or interviewed for some of these, but were you surprised that maybe he went this direction versus taking some of these bigger opportunities that all seem to just open up so quick throughout the majority of the season?
Well, what we don't know, Justin, is if he was actually offered any of those. There's a lot of speculation that Penn State talked with him or talked about him, but for a Big Ten school, for an SEC school, even a Big 12 or an ACC school, somebody who's not been a head coach at any level, that's a pretty risky move. But this is a good step. This isn't like, I think the world of the Mid-American Conference, being an Ohio native and all of that, but this isn't going from Ohio State to the MAC. This isn't going from Ohio State to the Mountain West. This is going to a program that has shown that they can be competitive at the national level, even though it's been a little while. So not surprised that it's something like this. I would have been more surprised in a good way had a school like Penn State or somebody like that offered him a job.
All right, good stuff. Paul Keels, voice of the Buckeyes. Ohio State, Indiana, 1 versus 2. Big Ten championship coming up on Saturday. Paul, your final thoughts and just views on this matchup heading in on Saturday. Again, 1 versus 2, 2 undefeated teams. This is what you want in your national championship, and we're fortunate to get it in our Big Ten championship matchup on Saturday.
Anticipated being an outstanding game, probably the toughest test, I shouldn't say probably, will be the toughest test that Ohio State's played all year. What's going to be crucial, taking care of the football, because Indiana is number 1 in the nation in turnover margin. They've come up with 16 interceptions. So, and this could really be a great game for fans because it could be an outstanding showcase for two very, very, very good quarterbacks.
All right, Paul Keels. Paul, you the man, sir. Appreciate your time as always. We'll talk soon.
You got it, Justin. Take care.
All right, good stuff. It's the Justin Kidder Show presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun food, sports, and spirits. That was the voice of the Buckeyes, Paul Keels, again, right here on 1410 ESPN Radio. We are Dayton's radio home for Ohio State football. More of the Justin Kidder Show when we come back.
Justin Kinner Show on 1410 ESPN Radio and on the stream at wingam.com.
6:30 is when pregame will begin on Saturday for the Ohio State Buckeyes as they get set to take on Indiana in the Big Ten championship game. As the Buckeyes, the number 1 team in the country, welcome in the number 2 team. I shouldn't say welcome in, but we'll go head-to-head with the number 2 team in the country in the Big Ten championship game. Look, I asked this question to Paul Keels because it really is fascinating. You think about how much has changed in the last calendar year for Ohio State. Think about what Ohio State has done in the last calendar year. Since losing to Michigan, they haven't lost a game. Since losing to Michigan, they've had, 5? It's 7 top 25 wins. Since losing to Michigan, they've won a national championship. They've finished a regular season undefeated. They're competing for a Big Ten championship. If you think about how big Saturday could be for Ohio State. If Ohio State goes on to knock off undefeated number 2 in the country, Indiana, and ultimately win a Big Ten championship game, I mean, can you guys think of, you had to win 4 in the playoff. You just won 12 straight in the regular season. You'd be 7. You would have won 17 straight games in that process. Okay. You would have beaten Tennessee. You would have beaten Oregon. You would have beaten Texas. You would have beaten Notre Dame. You would have beaten Texas again. You would have beaten Penn State. You would have beaten Michigan. You would have beaten Indiana, the number 2 team in the country. All within 1 calendar year, winning that Big Ten championship, finishing the regular season undefeated, beating Texas in the non-con, beating Texas, Oregon, Tennessee, and Notre Dame in the playoff, and then setting up a potential run to go repeat as national champions. I mean, I can't think of a more dominant run in the history of this program, and there has been so many dominant runs throughout the history of this program. And I'm not even saying it's been the most physically appealing. Like, this defense is the best in the country this year, but it's not one of the best defenses of all time by any means. This offense has been very, very efficient. It's been very effective. You have the best, wide receiver in all of college football, but I don't think by any means that this is even close to the best offense that Ohio State's ever had in its history. I mean, I think that those years where Ohio State was losing to Michigan and Ohio State was not making the playoff, I mean, I think that, when you look at those C.J. Stroud years, I think that those C.J. Stroud teams, those offenses were way more explosive and efficient, right? Like, I think that these offenses have been better. The defense, this defense is phenomenal. But, it is pretty strange watching how all of a sudden we were so close to just pushing Ryan Day out of Columbus to now. I don't think there's any coach in college football that has a better handle on their program than Ryan Day. Ryan Day has gone from looking like a lost puppy on the sideline to being a guy that I don't think there's any other coach that is more secure. I will say Marcus Freeman's doing a very good job over at Notre Dame. Obviously, Kirby Smart at Georgia, doing great things there. But, think about the momentum for Ryan Day and this Ohio State team. Nothing phases them right now. It went from not believing that Ryan Day could win a big game to now not doubting Ryan Day and the Buckeyes in any big game. I think that what Ohio State right now, the run that they are in the midst of, is probably one of the most impressive runs in my lifetime. And we've witnessed multiple national championships. We've witnessed so many undefeated seasons. We've witnessed so many great quarterbacks and running backs and wide receivers. And Ryan Day has a chance to do something that Jim Tressel didn't do and that Urban Meyer didn't do, and that's win multiple national championships at Ohio State. Urban is a legend in Columbus. He won 1. Ryan Day is going to win more than 1 national championship as head coach of the Buckeyes, and I think he's ultimately going to have a very good chance to get it this season. And I don't think he's going to slow down because you're going to bring the majority of this roster back next season and have a chance to go for it all again. The bottom line is between Julian Sayin, who I saw bet MGM today, if I'm not mistaken, moved into that number 1 spot, one of the favorite, the favorite to win the Heisman. I mean, there's going to be so many things that branch off of this. I think this is a big deal on Saturday. I think it is. Of course it's a big deal. It's a Big Ten championship game. Some view it as that this is just that this is an inconvenience. It's been amazing to me following on social media how many fans view this Big Ten championship as an inconvenience just because everyone ultimately wants to just get this team into the playoff. Let's start winning games that ultimately gear towards putting you in position to win a national championship. You can argue that the result of Saturday's game doesn't technically mean anything. Well, what do you mean? It's a chance to win a Big Ten championship. I get that. But ultimately, it's about winning a national championship. We learned that last year. All these fake goals, and I shouldn't say fake goals, but these goals that you put on the board that ultimately you wanted to beat Michigan, you wanted to win the Big Ten championship. You didn't accomplish either. All that people remember about last year, though, is that you won a national championship because that's all that matters. That's all that matters. It's all about winning national championships, beating Indiana on Saturday and remaining healthy. That to me, and to be honest with you, if beating Indiana and losing one or two star players versus losing to Indiana and keeping a healthy roster intact, give me the loss and a healthy roster heading into the playoff. I'll take that any day of the week. I'll take that any day of the week. That's why many people kind of view this Big Ten championship, as far as that's concerned. Doug says, last I heard it got changed to 8 o'clock. You talk about the kickoff time? I don't know what I said. I'm sorry. 8 o'clock, 6:30, the pregame coverage will begin for the championship, Big Ten championship coming up on Saturday. But 937-518-1410, can you think of a more impressive stretch for Ohio State football than what they have gone through recently in the last calendar year? And I even brought it up before. If you kind of stretch it out a little bit even further, you go back to the Indiana game last year. You go back to the Ohio State schedule from last year and what they did. The fact that they would ultimately go on, they faced a top 5 opponent in Indiana. Then they faced Michigan, right? Then you play Tennessee and then Oregon and Texas and Notre Dame and then Texas again. And, we know how this trend continued to ride for Ohio State as far as that's concerned. But we'll keep an eye. I mean, obviously it's going to be something that, this season now, and I've said it for a while, I think this season's been horrendously boring, but that's just how good Ohio State has been. Nobody has given them any kind of resistance. I was kind of semi-excited about the Illinois game. That was a dud. Penn State was a dud because Penn State was a dud from a month into the season. There were just no teams in the regular season that truly challenged Ohio State. You had the big build to the Texas game, and then after the Texas game, it was, well, I guess give us Michigan in November, and we'll just, semi-enjoy our Saturdays for the next couple of months. But obviously not the case now. It's full steam ahead. I still say this, where I was, I still think I was right about the expansion of the college football playoff. It kind of took out all of the urgency of the regular season. There's still there's more teams that are being talked about, but ultimately, the more things change, the more they stay the same. I mean, you look at the teams that are still involved, that are still in the conference, in the top 4, the teams that are favored to win the national championships, a lot of your same teams. It's your Ohio State, it's your Georgia, it's teams like that. Nothing's really changed. But ultimately, these games now, every week, everything matters. And that's what I'm looking forward to the most, nonetheless. 937-518-1410. That's the number to jump in on the conversation. I want to switch gears to the NFL. When we come back, Jason Fitz, who usually joins us every week, I caught his show earlier today, and they were talking about the Bengals in the AFC North. They ultimately threw it out, and kind of curious your guys' thoughts. I mean, I know a lot of you are homers, and I'm just a Bengals hater, so we got to meet somewhere in the middle here. Let's agree to meet somewhere in the middle. But look at the AFC North right now. With Joe Burrow back, regardless of record, throw records out the window. Throw records out the window in the AFC North. With Joe Burrow back, are the Bengals back to being the best team in the AFC North? 937-518-1410. Are your Bengals back to being the best in the AFC North? We'll discuss when we come back. It's the Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers.
Carpenter Carl Keith, wishing you and your homestead the best this holiday season.
Back to the Justin Kinner Show, right here on ESPN Dayton, 1410 Wing AM.
All right, and we are back. We're about to dive into the Bengals coming up here in just a moment. Ohio State, we had Paul Keels kick off the show with us a little bit ago. One thing we talked about was, of course, this run that Ohio State is in the midst of. You think about not just the 4 games, but the 4 teams that they had to beat. I don't think any team will ever have to go through a tougher stretch to win a national championship than Ohio State. Now, last year we saw that getting a bye didn't necessarily benefit you. I always do kind of question that as well a little bit. Now, if your team's banged up, and I guess with Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith, I mean, maybe that bye is going to be huge and all that. But there's already weeks between Selection Sunday and when these playoff games officially get underway. So it's kind of one of those, like, how much, how truly do, you're already getting time off to begin with. So, but it will be interesting to see how that kind of pans out in year 2, small sample size, only year 1 of the playoff, but none of the teams with the bye really, didn't really benefit them as far as that goes. So we'll see what happens, but Ohio State's going to get a bye. You would think, right? I mean, even if you lose to Indiana, you're not going to get blown out against Indiana, so you're not going to drop out of the top 4, and vice versa. I don't think Indiana should drop out of the top 4. I don't think you should be punished for playing in your conference championship game. But regardless, the path that Ohio State had to go on to win a national championship, I don't think any team will ever go on a tougher stretch of games to win a title than what Ohio State had to do last year. And that includes this year. Now, Ohio State, of course, looking at some of the brackets, if you will, or the pairings, Ohio State might have to face, Alabama, or Oklahoma right off the bat. I mean, it's going to be difficult, but that's what I do like about this playoff. I don't like what it did to the regular season, but I mean, the matchups you get, and these organic matchups as well. Like, I just think it's going to be huge, with what you're going to witness. This is why I don't like the bowl game setup. I just think that, these schools should be hosting these. I think that, these games should be in Columbus. I mean, and I know last year it was like, -15? I mean, it was miserable out. But it didn't stop anybody from going to cheer on Ohio State against Tennessee, and that's even with all you Buckeye fans pouting and crying and wanting Ryan Day fired. The shoe was as loud as it's ever been, and that atmosphere was unbelievable in the very first ever playoff game held at the shoe in that game in December last year. But I don't think it was a tougher, the more impressive stretch of games that Ohio State has been involved in. Those 4 playoff games, going undefeated this regular season. You got the number 2 team in the country you're about to face in the Big Ten championship game. And if Ohio State ultimately does hoist a Big Ten championship trophy at the end on Saturday night, I can't think of a more impressive stretch throughout the history of this program. Has there been more? I mean, I technically I'd ask Paul Keels dominant, maybe more dominant stretches, but I don't think more impressive stretches when you think about what they've had to accomplish at this point. So let's go to these. So on YouTube, he says, with the Big Ten being so blah this year, I don't think that this is that special of Ohio State. You consistently recruit top 5 classes. You should beat the lower teams, impressively. And, as far as that goes, look, that's a fair point. That's why I kind of said, okay, have there been more dominant stretches? Yes, but impressive stretches still, when you think about the fact that it's a first year, quarterback, 2 brand new running backs, an offensive line that needed some tweaking at the beginning of the season. The defense lost so many guys to the NFL. You're bringing in a new offense, even though it's a guy that had familiarity with the offense, it was still a new offensive coordinator, a new defensive coordinator. There's still a lot of things. And you are right. The Big Ten, I'm always very critical of the Big Ten. I don't believe in SEC bias. I get a lot of heat for that. When a conference is when the conference that has the best players in the world in it consistently, they put the most players in the NFL. They had gone through a stretch where they had won 4 straight national titles. It's kind of hard to sit there and argue against it. So I don't believe in SEC bias because you can't. I can't scream SEC bias and also pretend that the Big Ten is good. It is not good. I thought that the additions of Oregon and USC and Washington and teams like that were going to help. That has not been the case. Oregon's done their job. USC has just been as average. They've been as okay in the Big Ten as what they were in the Pac-12. Oregon's done their job. Kudos to them. Washington, need to see them kind of step it up a little bit. 2 years of blah. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to see Ohio State and USC go head-to-head next year. But ultimately, it's not even like those are more impressive brands in the Big Ten, but it hasn't really propped up the Big Ten. Rutgers, Maryland, Illinois, I mean, the list goes on and on. These teams, Iowa, these teams that, they'll have a average year every once in a while that's good based on their standards, but still not good for college football standards. So it's just one of those. I don't think the Big Ten is very good. So to his point, I understand what he's trying to say, but at the same time, it's not like you play good teams every single week. It's still about the totality of what this team has accomplished in the last calendar year that I find it to be one of the most impressive, because what the Big Ten has lacked, Ohio State has still made up for it in playing an impressive non-con opponent in Texas, having to beat those 4 teams in the college football playoff last year. Didn't play Indiana in the regular season, but if you beat Indiana on Saturday night, that's the number 2 team in the country, an undefeated team at that, and you'll have a Big Ten championship on top of it. So, and you just beat Michigan. So to me, I beyond agree with you, although it sounds like I'm disagreeing with you. I agree with you that the Big Ten makes it hard to boast about it, but Ohio State, to their credit, they played Texas in the non-con. All right. They went to Michigan and won. They're going to face number 2 Indiana coming up on Saturday. So I think that they've done enough in between to justify this being one of the most, if not the most impressive stretch calendar year in the history of the program. But I see where you're coming from. Ryan on Facebook says maybe Urban's first year, only because they were coming off of a 6-7 season and it was year 1, getting people to buy in, knowing the sanctions, and still just dominating. Love that answer. No, that's actually a very good answer, because if you think about this, like right now, Ohio State, their goal, I mean, they're gearing towards winning a national championship, towards winning a Big Ten championship. They have an end goal. That first year of Urban Meyer, coming off of that 6-7 season, you are very right, Ryan. What was their goal? They like, hey guys, let's go out there and win a Big Ten championship. Oh, we can't. All right, well, you know what? Let's strap on our boots and go win a national chip. Oh, damn. All right, well, how about let's just go win a bowl game? Oh, no, we can't win that either. So that's not a bad answer. I like that answer, Ryan. I think that's pretty good. If you're just joining us, we're kind of weighing in now. Think about this stretch from when Ohio State lost to Michigan last year. From the next day after that on, Ohio State to me is in the midst of the most impressive stretch in a single calendar year than any other, than any other team, than any other stretch throughout the history of the program for the Buckeyes. But that one's an interesting one, because that whole calendar year, you're coming off of a 6-7 season. You go get Urban Meyer. You run the table. Yeah, that's not a bad answer. I kind of like that one. Kozar on YouTube says you can't lose to Michigan last year, favored by 20, and the playoffs last year was weak. A lot of overhyped teams. I don't think look, Tennessee, I watched a lot of, I'm not sitting here saying Tennessee's a national champion, but that's a good competitive, you don't want to hear this, SEC team. That was a very explosive offense, and they had a lot of the weapons to hurt Ohio State that Ohio State manhandled and dominated. But Tennessee, that's a good palate warmer in the first round of a playoff. But you go basically to Oregon. You have to go, I went to the Rose Bowl last year. I mean, Oregon fans at the wazoo. It's on the West Coast. All right, Oregon undefeated, the number 1 team in the country. They were Big Ten champions. They beat Ohio State earlier in the season. That's not a gimme game either. And Texas was really good as well. Texas was a national championship contender. Notre Dame, number 1 defense in college football last year. So I'm going to press on that. I disagree with you on that. I think that was the most impressive stretch as far as that goes. Either way. Javi on Facebook says, I'm sorry, the 2015 title run was a good run for Ohio State. Yeah, that was a good storyline. I don't know if that was an impressive run, mainly because, man, you know what? That one was, so you mean the 14, when the inaugural college football playoff, I guess they technically won it in 15 nonetheless. But the bottom line is, yeah, I see what you're saying there. You lose Braxton, then you go to a freshman quarterback, and then that freshman quarterback leads you to the Michigan game, and they blow out Michigan, but they lose their quarterback. Cardale Jones comes in, to Big Ten championship game against Wisconsin. They couldn't just beat Wisconsin. They had to blow the doors off Wisconsin in the Big Ten title game, and they did that. They come from behind against Alabama, and then they, beat Oregon. Another memorable stretch. Yeah, that's a good one too. That's a good one as well. Ryan says, Georgia fans, are Georgia fans the same as Ohio State fans? Are we losing? I'm sorry. Are Georgia fans the same as OSU fans are with losing to your rival? Kirby is 1-8 versus Alabama. Anyone downplaying their championships because they didn't beat Alabama? Good point. This is where I don't downplay Ohio State, Michigan. I just don't overhype the result of that game to trump ultimate goals of winning championships. Losing to Michigan has prevented them from winning a Big Ten championship in quite some time, of course, but ultimately it's about national championships. People forget Georgia has been owned by Nick Saban in Alabama when Saban was there for the longest time, but Georgia was one of the most recent dynasties in college football and very well still might be. But either way, 937-518-1410. That's the number you can call and jump in on the conversation. I appreciate the interaction in the chat. Javi even goes on to say that 2014 title run was absolutely insane, especially when everyone said we shouldn't have been in the playoffs. That was the other wrinkle to it as well. That was the college football playoffs committee. They were trying to thump the Big 12 for not having a conference championship, which is why TCU was ultimately held out. And Ohio State I think Ohio State deserved to be in. I mean, after they throttled Wisconsin, they won a Big Ten championship, of course. But, when you think about the fact that they lost their quarterback and they still got in, and then you think about the last college football playoff or the 14 playoff, they ultimately knocked out Florida State, who was undefeated because their quarterback got hurt. Yeah. Storylines galore. There's never a shortage of interesting storylines when it comes to Ohio State. And for a boring regular season, there's a lot on the line coming up on Saturday as Ohio State takes on Indiana in the Big Ten championship game. But nonetheless, appreciate all the interaction in the chat. We'll get back to that coming up here in a moment. You can also call. Actually, let's get to the phones real quick. I know this guy doesn't want to talk college football, but we haven't talked to him in a while. Let's get his take on what's going on with the NFL. Hey, how about Dickie? Dickie from Dayton. Dick from Dayton.
Hey, happy holidays there, Kevin.
Oh,
Justin.
Oh, come on, Dickie. You were doing so good. I mean, I leave you on hold. Your brain's a little foggy. I left you on hold for a while. I get it.
Yeah,
I get it.
Yeah. I met your friend, Kevin Nash.
Yeah, where is Kevin Nash? I need to yell at Kevin to get him in here. But I'll tell him you said hi. There you go.
I like what you said, Austin, about the Buckeyes. Last year, Ryan was after he lost to Michigan, they put him down, but it's just a year that I've never seen the Buckeyes this good. When I was in college, I remember Cooper and Urban Meyer, but this is a good team, buddy, and I think they're going to go all the way, Justin.
Hey, do you think that how much do you think they're going to win by on Saturday against Indiana? You think they blow out Indiana, or you think it's a close one?
38 to about, I'd say maybe 38-21.
That's not bad. Like, Ohio State hasn't given up more than 16 points all season. So that's pretty impressive for that defense. And I think Indiana is going to be the best offense that they faced. So if they give up 21, I think that's respectable. Yeah. I think that 38-21 prediction is not bad. I'd say 38-24. I'll give Indiana a field goal in that range, but I don't think that's a bad prediction, Dickie. I think the defense has been phenomenal, but I don't think that they faced an offense like Indiana. So we'll see what happens.
Well, one thing, though, I was surprised with my friend Joe Burrow come back and beat a good team, didn't he? I was surprised, Oh,
I wasn't surprised that Joe Burrow came back and played well. That's what he does. What I'm surprised about is that horrible defense, Dick. He decided to play like a solid defense. If that defense plays like that moving forward, the Bengals might win these last 5 and ultimately get into the playoff if that defense continues to play like that.
I want your opinion is, I know there's a lot of Browns fans. What do you think about Stefanski and the defense? I mean, their defensive coordinator. Do you think it's time for him to go? Do you think he can win 2 or 3 more? The Browns will win a couple more games?
I mean, they've lost so much at this point to where winning even hurts them. So, look, I don't think Stefanski's going anywhere, and I don't think that, Andrew Berry's going anywhere. I would love for them to mix it up. You can't lose Jim Schwartz. I think I think that's the key. I would almost move Jim Schwartz into the head coach position. I would go get a young offensive coordinator to help rebuild this offense and keep this team in a position to be competitive moving forward. I don't want them to blow it all up. I love Jim Schwartz. I would love to see him as the head coach of this Cleveland Browns team, reward him for all the work he's put in on the defensive side, and go get an offensive coordinator to restart, whether it is with Shador or Mendoza or whoever the heck they get in the draft next year.
I'm thinking, though, I'm thinking like you, but now this has got to be an easy game for the Browns Sunday, doesn't it?
It's,
a 1-11 team?
Come on. It's Cleveland, Dickie. There's no easy game for Cleveland.
No, but, I'm listening to the games, but I tell you, I don't think Andrew Siciliano's doing a bad job. I think he does a pretty good job on the Browns.
I don't think he does a bad job. I just think he has a bad job having to call games for this team right now. My goodness, it's brutal. It's brutal. But Dickie, it was good hearing from you. I appreciate you.
You know who I miss?
Who do you miss?
Donovan, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Hey, tell Paul hi. Does Paul ever ask about me, Paul Keels?
He said to tell you hello. But hey, I appreciate you calling, Dickie. We'll talk soon, okay?
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. 937-518-1410. Troy on Facebook, he says, any fake news today to talk about? Troy is a Michigan fan, and he's a little upset because his team got exposed for cheating earlier in the week. So Troy's now just continuing to be a troll on all of my posts and in the show. He's upset. I don't know why you're mad at me. Like, this is what Michigan fans do. Our team's going to cheat, and you got to let it happen. And if you talk about it, we're going to get mad at you. Come on, Troy. Ryan Day had an inkling that they were going to cut the communication between him and his quarterback this past Saturday, and it randomly just happened. You think it's a coincidence? And you're mad at me because Ryan Day exposed it? He put it out there? You think Ryan Day's just making it up? I don't think that you're the fan base that gets to accuse other teams of making stuff up. I think y'all need to sit this one out and probably just say, yeah, my bad. Didn't you learn your lesson from the last time you tried saying that your cheating program didn't do anything wrong? Come on. We're not doing that, Troy. Your team's a bunch of cheats. They're a bunch of scumbags. You support a cheating scumbag program. Now, go play with your friends and let us talk about teams who actually win the right way. Okay, you go do that. I'm going to go do my thing. It's the Justin Kidder Show, presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits. We'll be right back.
and WING, Dayton's ESPN Radio. Now, back to the Justin Kinner Show on 1410 ESPN Radio and on the stream at wingam.com.
All right, and we are back. I'm Justin Kinner. It's the Justin Kinner Show, hour number 2, 4 o'clock here in the Miami Valley. Hope everyone's had a great Thursday. Appreciate Paul Keels. He hopped on with us to kick off the show earlier. If you missed it, we'll have that for you again coming up here around the corner. 937-518-1410. My friend Troy hanging out in the chat. And I say friend loosely. One, I've never met him. Two, he don't like me. So my friends don't like me either. But Troy's all upset because he's a Michigan fan. And for whatever reason, he's all up in his feelings because Ryan Day called out his team for cheating or attempting to cheat again in the game this past weekend. So now he's doing what he always does. I'm sure he'll make fun of my Browns in a moment. He's making fun of Wright State now. He said, how did Wright State do last night? They lost a close one against a team that was projected to finish at the top of the league on the road. I mean, what do you want me to say? Oh, do you want me to say what your team's coach says when they underperform? Teams love lining up to play our team. Good team. Teams do stuff against our team that they normally don't do because they're so motivated to play us. I mean, is that what you want me to say, Troy? Come on now. Let's get to it. I'm Justin Kinner. It's the Justin Kinner Show, 1410 ESPN Radio. Want to talk some Reds coming up here. I want to talk some Reds now. I want to get to the Bengals. I know I teased the Bengals a little bit ago. We'll get into some NFL in a moment. So the Cincinnati Reds yesterday, I found it interesting as we all sit back and wait to see what they're going to do regarding Kyle Schwarber. We know that if the Reds ultimately pull off a deal to get Kyle Schwarber, that it's probably going to really nuke any of their offseason plans to touch the bullpen and get that, fixed up. Really going to hurt any chances of them adding any depth pieces anywhere else on the roster. It probably is going to put them in position where they have to bring back last year's complete roster with Kyle Schwarber and really no other moves after that. So it's going to be one of those interesting that do you want the Reds to, load up the bullpen and fine tune that and pretty much bring everyone back from last year, minus Nick Martinez and a couple faces? Or do you want Kyle Schwarber and a very weak bullpen with no depth and just have to really rely on what's in the rotation and really hope that, by the way, I don't think you could just add one bat into this lineup and expect that the whole lineup's going to take off and be one of the best in baseball. But beggars can't be choosers. We'll take anything at this point. So last night, I don't know what this means. Last night, the Cincinnati Reds were able to agree to a deal to bring in their free agent closer, Emilio Pagan, as they agreed to a 2-year, $20 million contract. They agreed to a 2-year, $20 million contract last night. And the first thought I had was, oh, that's awesome because the Reds need that. The second thought I had is, damn, they're not going to get Kyle Schwarber now. And that's what sucks about being a fan of a team like this is we should be happy that the Reds got a 2-year, $20 million deal done with Emilio Pagan. But I instantly got angry. We should be, as Reds fans, guys, happy that they went out and got Emilio Pagan, that they got him to return. He was phenomenal last year. All right, I don't really care about the record. 2-4, whatever. I don't really care about that. Right-hander, finished with an ERA just a hair under 3. 32 saves and 38 opportunities. I mean, he ranks second in the National League in saves and tied for 5th in the majors. So to go get, if you're just going to base it off those numbers alone, statistically a top 5 closer in baseball for $10 million a year, that's a heck of a deal. And deals are what the Reds thrive on. They hope they could just make a deal somehow. So Emilio Pagan, who, by the way, is also 34 years old, you get that 2-year deal with an option for year 2. I love the move. You need this move. When you have a rotation like the Reds, when you have a Hunter Green and a Nick Lodolo and an Andrew Abbott and obviously Burns now, Chase Burns in there, you're going to get Rhett Lauder back. I know I'm missing somebody. Who am I missing? Brady Singer, who they got for Jonathan India last year. Like, they have a lot of talent. They have a lot of pieces in the system. They have Graham Ashcraft, like obviously for, in the bullpen, they have pieces and so you get a closer like that. When you have a reliable closer, Pagano had the second most saves in the National League last year, the fifth most saves in all of baseball. When you have a reliable closer to come in to close the deal, when you have a great rotation like that, you should feel really, really good about what the Reds did yesterday. But the problem is they had him last year. They had a top 5 closer in baseball last year. They had one of the best rotations in baseball last year. And yet it was still painful watching them try to go out there and consistently win series. And they did some of the most off-the-wall stuff. They would win the series they shouldn't and lose the series they shouldn't. They would lose series to the worst teams in baseball, but then they'd go and beat the Yankees. Nothing made sense for the Cincinnati Reds last year. Even the way they made the playoffs. They didn't make the playoffs. They backdoored their way in. And I mean this as respectfully as possible. I've disagreed with so many people who know way more about baseball than me that try to convince everybody that the Reds were, that they didn't backdoor their way into the playoffs. I disagree. They backdoored their way into the playoffs. They even lost in a game that if they would have won, they would have made the playoffs. They even lost that game. And they only made the playoffs because the Mets went on a historic plummet. And that's not a game plan. You can't sit there and say, well, hey, this roster with the top 5, statistically a top 5 closer in baseball, with a top 10, top 5 rotation in baseball. So, a great rotation. Now you have a fantastic closer. You have Ellie De La Cruz. Sal Stewart, I think, is going to have a breakout year. I can't wait for Sal Stewart. I've read a lot of great things about him. He's already trimmed down. He's putting on muscle. I mean, he's going ham this offseason. I'm excited about a lot of things, but they had a lot of these things last year, and it didn't matter. Why am I supposed to believe that it's going to matter this year if they're not going to go out and make the confidence that they are going to go out? Okay, I don't have the confidence that they're going to go out and get Kyle Schwarber. And I fear that last night, by getting that deal done with Pagan, that's basically signaled that Schwarber, the chances of them signing him are pretty much gone as well. Or there's another way to look at this, because $10 million for a closer, good for the Reds for being willing to do that, because they could have gone a different route. They could have tried to prime somebody else in this bullpen right now to maybe approach them to try to frame them, because it's not like Emilio Pagan that we headed into last season and said, that's our guy, that's our closer. It was just kind of a closer by committee a little bit. The Reds could have looked at that and said, well, we figured that out last year with him. We have some arms in the system that we can really kind of throw out there during spring training and kind of start grooming them to be, a closer, or put them in the position to do that. You know what I mean? Like, it'll be interesting. I've also thought about, using a Nick Lodolo, something along those lines. When you look at the depth that they have with their starting pitching, one of those big arms that you look at, I think, is ultimately going to become a bullpen, like a strong bullpen closer role for the Reds. One of them is. I don't know which one. I think if Nick Lodolo has another year where he just can't stay healthy, I think that he's too talented to move on from. But my goodness, you got to find a way to utilize his strengths, use them in smaller dosages. So maybe a bullpen move there. So what I'm saying is the Reds had options, and they chose to spend $10 million. They only had, because what they also tried telling us is that they only had $20 million to try to patch all the remaining holes on this roster. Well, you just used 10 of that 20 to go after one player in Emilio Pagan. So now you have to fix all the other holes with $10 million. I think if I'm going to put my negative cap on right now, says you just signed Emilio Pagan, you have no chance of getting Kyle Schwarber. Now I'm going to take my negative hat off and I'm going to put my positive cap on. And the positive side of me is saying the Reds, with only $20 million to spend, would they really have spent half of that just on one player? So now I'm like, no, they did that because they're going to go make him their closer because they feel very good about their rotation, and they're going to feel even really good about this offense now, dropping Kyle Schwarber into this lineup and now having a legit closer, a great rotation, and now having some fire in this lineup, and now the Reds have a shot. I wonder if that's a move that is said, hey, we can't just get Kyle Schwarber and call it a day. We have to get Kyle Schwarber and another move. I don't know. I'm so torn. What does the Emilio Pagan move mean for your Cincinnati Reds? Did that all but signal that the chances of getting Schwarber are dead and gone? Or did it signal that the Reds are going all in? Reds fans, I'm curious. 937-518-1410. What did that Emilio Pagan move mean last night? If you remember, Nick Kroll said they're going to keep their payroll the same as last year, which means once they took care of the raises with the arbitration players, that left them with about $20 million to spend. You just spent half of that on one player in Emilio Pagan. Does that make sense to spend half of your available payroll just on one player on a closer? And now you have to patch everything else with 10? Or is this team about to open up and spend way more than what they had anticipated and that they're about to go get Kyle Schwarber too? 937-518-1410. That's the number to jump in on the conversation. Where do you believe the Reds are going with this? Do you believe that they actually have a shot to get Kyle Schwarber? Do you believe when they say that they are in on Kyle Schwarber, do you believe that they're actually in on Kyle Schwarber? Are they going to get this done? Or did the Emilio Pagan signing all but signal, no, we got to put all of our eggs in other baskets, not put all of our eggs in one basket? 937-518-1410. We'll jump back into that more when we come back.
ESPN 1410 Wing AM weather.
Before
Justin Kinner back with you here, 1410 ESPN Radio, the Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits. The Dayton Weight Loss Secret Program has successfully helped thousands of people lose 20 to 30 pounds in the first month or two, myself included. Of course, you can schedule your free consultation in person or virtually by giving Dr. Justin and his staff a call today, 937-999-1480, or online at DaytonWeightLossSecret.com. The Reds right now, we talked about it on yesterday's show that, you have Ken Rosenthal, ESPN's Jeff Passan, a lot of national MLB insiders are coming out saying, hey, that the Reds are very much alive in the Kyle Schwarber sweepstakes. I mean, this is a guy that hit 56 home runs last year with the Philadelphia Phillies. He's in his 30s. He's not going to get a 10-year Juan Soto type deal. So because of that, and because of his strengths being his ability to hit the ball to the ballpark, the Reds could theoretically justify jumping into the deep end for a move like this. They don't have to marry him long-term. A 3 to 5 year contract in that range, probably in that 20, let's throw that out the window, $25 to $30 million range. And we could see the Red Sox, and depending on the bidding war and how high that number gets up, there's going to be other teams that could spend more on him than the Cincinnati Reds. But let's not discount how many times Kyle Schwarber has been throwing feelers out there. He's done many media hits talking about how much it would mean to him to play, or to come back and live and play where, he grew up watching the Reds. He loved the Reds growing up. I think that this is too big of an opportunity for the Reds to squander, but we also know their limitations. It's not about, do they want Kyle Schwarber? Of course they want Kyle Schwarber. A guy that hit 56 home runs last year. Imagine bringing him to Cincinnati, making him your DH. 56 home runs playing in Philly last year. Imagine 56 home runs. Imagine what that guy could do playing 80 games at Great American Ballpark. Not included what he does outside of GABP. I just think that this is too big of an opportunity. When you think about, you have an aging manager, a Hall of Fame manager in Terry Francona. This window at Terry Francona is probably going to last another 2 to 3 years. Elly De La Cruz, you're not going to be able to afford that $600,000 to $700,000 contract extension. You have him for another 2 to 3 years. All right, Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo. You look at Andrew Abbott. You have Chase Burns. You have all of these young pitchers that you have developed and brought up through your system, and they're homegrown, and you have them under team control, and they're cheap and affordable, and you have them for the next 2 to 3 years. Your window is 2 to 3 years, which means you could sign Schwarber for that 3 to 5 year window, get 3 years out of him. And when you trade Elly De La Cruz here in a few years, and when, of course, Terry Francona retires and you trade away Hunter Green, you could trade away Kyle Schwarber, load up on all of your prospects that the Reds ownership just absolutely obsesses over, and we'll start this baby all over again. But in the meantime, go all in. Last night, I don't know if this was a good or a bad thing. It was announced that the Reds agreed to a 2-year contract deal, with free agent closer Emilio Pagan, who pitched last year with the Reds, but had such a big year that we thought he had pitched his way out of Cincinnati. He finished with the 5th most saves in all of baseball last year, the 2nd most saves in the National League, an ERA under 3. I mean, he was phenomenal last year for the Reds, and they're able to get a 2-year deal done with him. Nick Cross said that the payroll for the Reds would be around the same as last year. Well, once they took care of the arbitration-eligible players and gave them those raises, that left about $20 million left for them to spend this free agency period, if indeed this team is sticking to what last year's payroll window was. Well, if you had $20 million to spend, you're trying to go after Kyle Schwarber, who's going to cost $25 to $30 a year. That's not lining up with what you said. And now you go and you give half of what you have remaining to Emilio Pagan. So you have $10 million left to fix and to continue to add to this bullpen, add depth to this lineup, if you are indeed not going the route of bringing in Kyle Schwarber. Or was this the Reds signaling, because we only have Elly for a few years, because we only have, Terry Francona for a few years, because we only have a short window with keeping all these pieces intact, we're going to go all in this window? Is that what that Emilio Pagan move signaled yesterday? 937-518-1410. What happened yesterday? Did Emilio Pagan being signed by the Reds signal to you that the Reds are out on the Kyle Schwarber sweepstakes? Or is this signaling that oh yeah, we're going all in. We're bringing back Emilio Pagan, a statistical top 5 closer in baseball. And yes, we're going to do what we can to get Kyle Schwarber to come to Cincinnati. 937-518-1410. Let's go to Troy. Jeff and Troy, thanks for holding, sir.
Hey, Justin, can you hear me all right?
Yes, sir. Yes, you're coming through clear.
Awesome. I'm all fired up about Kyle Schwarber, but first I got to go back to last week because we need to celebrate that Ohio State-Michigan win every week of the year after these last 4 years. And I real quickly just want to say I really enjoyed how Ryan Day managed that game. There was a point in the first quarter where the camera flashed on him, and he seriously was looking like, I'm trying not to look like I'm out of my skin right now. But the decisions he made to kick field goals when we were inside the 5 and to punt and trust his defense and just let the game come to him. And I mean, how many years did we watch Harbaugh just step on himself trying to force things? So it was very refreshing to watch Ryan Day, and I want to give him his flowers for managing that game to the strengths of that team. That being said, if the Reds can't afford Kyle Schwarber, they need to sell the team. Pull out the meme, sell the team, Bob. You can't claim poor when you have this much talent sitting around, and this move makes so much sense on so many levels. It's a commitment to the fans. It's a commitment to the players that we are serious about trying to win a championship and not just try to back our way into the playoffs. I swear to God, Justin, there's going to be a poster outside the stadium next year that says something like the Dodgers had to go through us. You know, that we lost to the eventual World Series champions when the only reason we were in the playoffs is because the Mets stepped on themselves over and over and over again. So I am in complete agreement with you that whatever has to happen to get Schwarber on that team needs to happen.
No, I'm with you. And I think that the Reds would have been better off. Here's what I would have appreciated and respected more. Jeff, if the Reds would have come out, and I thought that's what they kind of did, when Nick Krall came out and said that they were going to keep payroll the same, I mean, he came out and said it right away. Before free agency really started getting underway, he made sure to drop that out there. And I thought that was him basically letting fans know we're not going to be heavy spenders this free agency period. I didn't like it, but I respected it because he was setting the tone. Let's not get our fans' hopes up. And I respect that. What I don't respect is, okay, now you're heavily involved in these conversations. Why get involved in a conversation that you know you're not going to be able to afford him to begin with? I'm hoping that the only reason they engage in these talks is because they're willing to spend the money. If not, why even tease the fans? Why even get our hopes up by beginning to talk in this situation that you know you're not going to win? I just really hope that by even entertaining this, that they're willing to spend money. That's what I'm hoping that this means. But again, we've been stung way too many times.
How many times have we heard, they make a phone call, are you interested? No. And then they can turn around to everybody and say, We tried. We were involved. We were right there.
That's what they do.
We just couldn't cross the finish line.
And that's what I'm hoping is not the case here.
I am 100% in agreement with you, Justin. Thank you so much for taking my call. Have a great night. Go Bucks.
All right. Appreciate you. That was Jeff and Troy. Jeff, thank you for the call. 937-518-1410. 2 years, $20 million contract for Emilio Pagan with an option for year 2. But the Reds only have $20 million. According to Nick Krall from about a month ago when he said they were going to keep payroll about the same, that gives them about $20 million to spend this offseason. And they just spent 10 of it on Emilio Pagan. That doesn't leave a lot to address all the other holes. So if you're going to go 50% of your available payroll to one player, does that signal that they're willing to do that because they know they're about to spend a lot more? I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to make of this. Emilio Pagan, that deal that the Reds did last night, did that signal to you that the Reds are out on the Kyle Schwarber sweepstakes? 937-518-1410. Mo, you're on live, sir. Welcome.
Thanks for having me on, Justin. I agree completely with the previous caller. Schwarber is perfect for the Reds. You don't always get a perfect fit that's available for a team. Because of his age and because they can get him on a shorter contract than normal, maybe a 4-year, 3 to 4 year. He is custom made for the Cincinnati Reds. The guy hit a pop-up and it would go out of the stadium. He is the perfect choice for the Reds, and I think the Reds are going after him. I really believe that. I think that the Pagan contract that they just got with him for 2 years, I think that is an indication they're trying to show Schwarber himself that, hey, we can be a contender in the playoffs with you on our team. So I think that that's a perfect fit for the Reds. They're not going to have a perfect fit available all the time. And he's going to be in that lineup. He's going to be so dangerous. Imagine if the Reds had him this past year.
Yeah. 56 home
it
runs. And imagine what that number would be if he played half his games at GABP. It would be unreal.
Yeah, it would be absolutely crazy. So, the Dodgers, they've gone out and spent a ton of money to get 2 championships, go out there and do what they've done. But imagine the Reds against the Dodgers now with Schwarber on that team. It just changes everything. I mean, it makes every player on that team a little bit better. So that's, again, I agree with the previous caller. I appreciate you having me on. And before I get off, I wanted to say I really appreciated and liked that story about Ron Harper and the Flyers. I never heard that before, and that was really interesting to hear it.
No, yeah, and he was in studio. He was on the Keith Byers show, and he had shared that. And I just that was one of my favorite stories, hearing him say that. But yeah, so that was the comparison to this. Is a lot of times teams will reach out to agents of free agents just to get a conversation going, so that the media could pick up on it, and then the media puts it out there that, hey, they're engaged in talks, knowing that they don't have a shot to get him. But then when he ultimately signs elsewhere, they could say, hey, we did our part. We tried. He just ultimately didn't pick us. I was comparing it to the Ron Harper UD situation when he was about to commit to Miami back in the day. So I thought that was a good comparison, but who knows?
Yeah, great comparison, and appreciated it. And I do think that they are actively going after him. And I think Schwarber wants to play for the Reds. I really do. I think I would rather play in Cincinnati than Philadelphia. Wouldn't you?
Oh, yes, and especially when he's talking about living here, like his family and spending so much time in Middletown. I just think you keep talking about it's the perfect opportunity. This isn't just some random power bat free agent. This is a guy that's from here, that wants to live here and play here, and you don't have to marry him long term. And the amount of window left on his career kind of fits the window of which this team has as far as a competitive timeline is concerned, with the way all the other contracts are lining up at this point, even with Terry Francona. So I just think it makes too much sense. They will never have another opportunity like this to have all their ducks in a row. This might be in this current landscape of baseball, this would be their chance to have put out probably the most competitive team that they're capable of. They can't screw it up. I hope they get it done.
Yeah, and Middletown is hot. We got a VP out of it. Let's get a power hitter for the Reds. and yeah, I mean, Middletown is extremely hot right now. So, you strike while the fire is hot, and don't let the opportunity to get this guy into a Reds uniform pass us by. So that's all I got. I appreciate you having me on.
Appreciate you. Thank you, man. That was an interesting call. I mean, we talked about Ron Harper, UD, Miami of Ohio, JD Vance. I mean, that was like the ultimate random smorgasbord of tie-ins right there. But appreciate Mo calling in. Shout out to Jeff and Troy. I know there's some others on hold. I can't get to your calls this second because we got to pay some bills. But 937-518-1410. That's the number to call and jump in. I don't know. The Emilio Pagandi, I've been negative all day, saying, you know what? That signals to me that they are out on Kyle Schwarber. But then I thought Mo brought up a good point. Mo said that he believes that, hey, by the Reds going out to get that Pagan deal done last night, was that done because they know they're not going to get Schwarber, or was that done to show Schwarber, hey, we can't pay you as much as Philly and the Red Sox and others, but you want to live here? Okay, this lineup, this ballpark, I mean, you're going to mash in this ballpark. You mash wherever you go, but you're going to mash in this ballpark. Play for a Hall of Fame manager in Terry Francona. You have a generational talent you'll be hitting in front of in Ellie De La Cruz. You have a top 5 rotation in baseball, and we just went out and got you a very, very good closer. So there could be that side to it too. I'm all over with this. 1 second, I'm negative. The next second, I'm positive about the direction of this. I don't know what to make of it. It's going to be a fun story to follow. I just hope I just don't want to be played by the Reds. And if the Reds don't get them, I believe we've been played. I believe that they did this on purpose. I believe that they got all of our hopes up just to say that they tried. And that's what I just don't want to have happen. Just get it done. Well, we were interested in them. You can't be interested in Kyle Schwarber without knowing that it's going to cost money. Right? Like if you don't have enough money to buy a house, you don't go house shopping. If you don't have enough money for a down payment on a home, don't go get a realtor and start looking for homes. If you know you don't have enough for Kyle Schwarber, why even go on the Kyle Schwarber market to begin with? Don't waste our time. And what you can't do is you can't sit there and have no money for a down payment on a home, have no money to buy a home, and then go looking at all these homes and then bitch and complain and say, well, damn, that house is nice, but I can't afford that. Well, no one made you go look at the home, stupid. Oh, well, we can't afford Kyle Schwarber. Well, a-hole, you shouldn't have gone and talked to him to begin with. I'm going to be so mad when I see that Kyle Schwarber signs with somebody else. I don't know why I just got angry because I'm getting excited about the idea of him playing in Cincinnati. They are screwing with us. They're messing with us, right? Like, there's no way. I would have been more happy if the Reds wouldn't even have entertained it. If the Reds would have just come out and said, we're not even going to swim in the sweepstakes of the Kyle Schwarber talk, we'd be angry, but we'd just move on. But now that we're seeing it in the headlines, now you got our hopes up, and now you're going to pull the rug out from underneath us. I'm going to unleash like you've never heard me unleash before if they don't get this damn deal done. What's taking so long? What does he want? Give it to him. You don't have leverage here. You have to get this done. You have a fan base that's ready to turn on you. And maybe, we already know how this is. Phil doesn't give a damn. The last time fans had enough, Phil mocked everybody. So we kind of already know how this guy responds to fans when they get upset about this stuff. Maybe he learned his lesson from the last time. Who knows? We'll see what happens. It's the Justin Kidder Show presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits.